Okay, this is another episode of Gotham 1919 to 39. This time with the Riddler. I don't know what to make of Edward Nigma. Are they gonna make fun of his name? Is there a specific point where they take advantage of the time period? I don't know. I'm not a huge Riddler kind of guy, and I know that if there were ever future Arkham games, they would want Riddler out of it, especially Sean Connery Johnny. Let's check this out. I don't know what to make of this.
Riddle me this. What do liars do after death? This question, among many others, marked the reign of terror that plagued Gotham for many years.
That's one heck of a way to open it, with a riddle.
Questions that stumped police, confused the general public.
What do liars do after death? I don't know.
People. Questions that could only seemingly be answered by the Batman.
If the liars were dead, they would probably go through a life review. They probably judge themselves and regret being liars. Or they would probably go to heck for a little while. But the liars witnessing death? Denial.
These questions cropped up from 1925 to 1928.
8-letter word can have a letter taken away and still have a word. I'm analyzing the details.
It came from one man, Edward Nigma, or as he was better known, the Riddler.
Fucking costumes and designs, man. I swear. Either it could be creepy or it can be hilarious. Is that how the Riddler does his riddles? Via the cards or something?
Of the police files pertaining to the Riddler's activity, we now know more to the story of this deranged criminal. Born into a family of good standing and comfortable assets, he was an only child who was the pride of his mother, a socialite, and his father, one of Gotham's most sought-after attorneys. From a very young age, everyone could see that Edward was special. He was much more aware of the goings-on of the world than other children his age. This awareness soon matured into what really made him unique, his intellect. With the gift that was his intelligence also came a curse. He found that he would often be bored by many of his friends and family. Edward became obsessed with riddles and puzzles, anything that would help him with his ever-present boredom, chasing the thrill of and always seeking the next challenge to overcome. His parents spent their many resources in fostering Edward's gift, even though they may not have understood his fascination with the riddles or games as he called them. But they did see it as a way to focus his talents. Edward enjoyed these puzzles not just for the challenge. He also loved to flaunt his self-described intellectual superiority to people whom he considered to be beneath him. Edward's hubris was on par with his intelligence. His mind was sharp, and so was his interaction with others, as he had no patience to suffer fools.
Narcissism.
When he grew into young adulthood, his parents sent him to Gotham University to follow in his father's footsteps and study law. It was there that he was introduced to the ideas of German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Soon, Edward became obsessed with Nietzsche's philosophical theory of the Übermensch. This theory stated that if one was transcended beyond normal levels of consciousness,
that's the color
like
pick.
one such as Edward Nigma considered himself to be, they were exempt from the normal morals that influence the average man.
He looks ridiculous.
Nietzsche's Übermensch theory is a fascinating concept when you think about it. on one hand, you have the idea.
They're having other people talk about this? I have not seen that before.
That one can
In this
aspire
series.
to be more than the outdated moral values that they're made out to be. To transcend average humanity, as it were. On the other hand, you have someone like
Why is
Edward
the camera
Nygma,
quality shit?
who saw this as an excuse to commit the gruesome murders that he did and chalk it up to being above society's morals. While the city of Metropolis had their Superman, Gotham had the Riddler.
A Superman reference, really?
What Edward took this to mean was he was exempt from the average morality of society due to his advanced intellect and his station in life. Using his knowledge of the law system, he strove to contrive the perfect crime. He would commit murder
The
and get away with
perfect
it.
crime.
And he had the perfect victims in mind.
This reminds me of a Legal Eagle animated episode where there were two guys back in the 20s or 30s trying to commit a perfect crime, but one or two of them got a little sloppy, and as a result, they end up getting arrested. Now, at the time, they were going to be executed, but somebody suggested to have mercy. And that mercy just led to the two guys spending a life in prison. And I believe that some say that because of the act of mercy, things have changed. There were like less execution stuff going around. I mean, there's still execution to be had in some areas of the United States. Not sure if it happens also anywhere else, but yeah. The whole perfect... That's what this reminds me of. Now, what is the Riddler's perfect crime?
A classmate who consistently annoyed him with his ineptitude and his intellectual rival in the class. One to kill, one to frame. He spent a great deal of time poring over the details of his plan. What day, what time, what setting. Nygma knew that in certain instances one could leave absolutely no trace of oneself at a crime scene. The evidence had to be indisputable. Then the day finally arrived. He executed his plan quickly and suddenly so that he could utilize the element of surprise, and murdered the classmate that annoyed him using a knife. The knife belonged to his rival classmate and was a family heirloom. He left this at the scene of the crime so that there would be no doubt who the supposed perpetrator was. He then planted one of the victim's belongings in his rival's jacket, and a handkerchief belonging to the victim, covered in fresh blood. When police arrived at the scene of the crime, linking the knife to Nygma's classmate, they immediately took him into custody and searched his things, finding the item belonging to the victim. The innocent man was locked away, and Edward Nygma walked free.
Shit.
The thrill of the idea...
Yeah. Earlier I asked if this was going to be one of the cases where they take advantage of the time period, just like Two-Face. And then I remembered watching a cop who reacted to LA Noire, the video game, and he liked the game. That game takes place in the 20s, and he noted that they were touching the evidence back in the day without any gloves. Nowadays, you have to wear gloves so that way you won't contaminate the evidence, but back in the day, that wasn't possible. I wonder if they're going to bring that one up. I hope they do bring it up because back in the day, they cannot wear gloves. They did not wear gloves. And finding evidence and such has gotten better as time went on.
The idea Edward experienced during the planning and execution of the crime was soon over. A new feeling of disappointment crept in, as the crime was all too easy.
Easy?
As the years went on, he graduated from Gotham University and became a very successful lawyer, with no one the wiser as to the atrocity he had committed. While he was successful, he began to realize that he was also very bored. The life of a lawyer had become dull to him, and he yearned for excitement again. His mind constantly went back to the perfect crime he had committed in college, and his mind reached an inevitable conclusion. He was to begin killing again.
Oh my gosh.
With each person he killed, his flair increased and his ambition grew. By the time he had murdered 8 people, the police still had no clue who was behind the killing spree.
I'm rather surprised that he doesn't use his intelligence to break into some of the most high security shit places ever.
His balance of criminal activity and work were fairly even, although Edward alienated himself from his family, and he took no romantic interests.
Of course he wouldn't.
He didn't find his parents intellectually stimulating enough, and romance was not an option for such a self-obsessed man as he.
Of course.
He eventually found his way back home, murdering his parents. They had been an obstacle to his ascent, and so it only seemed fitting to remove that obstacle from his path. Never mind that they were the people that raised him.
Wow, talk about ungrateful.
His ambition and confidence increased to the point that he taunted the police by leaving riddles, questions, at the scene of the crime. He would leave clues as to his identity and information, but the police were not trained for this type of criminal, and struggled to solve them.
Then comes the Batman.
Commissioner James Gordon enlisted the help of the Batman in taking on these riddles.
That's Commissioner Gordon?
It was one of the first times that Gotham's police collaborated with the vigilante, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. One by one, the Batman solved Enigma's riddles, and the trail inevitably led back to Edward. Once
It's
they had
about
the true
time.
identity
Of
the
course he's
Riddler,
the only
it
one
didn't
that's
take
be
long
able to
track
do
him
this.
down and lock him up.
So, you want to know about my uncle, Uncle Bullock?
William Bullock. Arthur, great-nephew of Harvey Bullock. He's an OC. Still, it is nice that they actually got someone to interview for this.
Yeah. Oh, well, the year it was 1920. I don't know. It was 1920 something. And Uncle Bullock. Oh man, Uncle Bullock and the JCPD. Let me tell you, they were at their wits' end with this guy. They called himself the Riddler. Yeah, the Riddler. Because after riddle, it was like some sort of, I don't know, a gimmick. Everybody got a gimmick. And there was no end in sight to the killings or even the madness. It made them desperate. You know, it made them desperate. Even desperate enough to turn to the guy they'd also been hunting not that long ago, the Batman. Yeah. And the Batman, he was getting results, and so they brought him in. It was like a new chapter in Gotham City Police Department, and they were beginning to turn things around. You know, it just started.
Desperate times
turning
calls
just
for
like
desperate
that.
measures.
And it ended up helping, them in the end. But between you and me, the guy's nuts.
But not in a good way.
He was encouraged by his legal counsel to plead insanity. Edward would have no such thing being said about him. His crimes should be studied as examples of perfection. He chose to dismiss his defense team and represent himself. If the evidence was not so overwhelming, he may have had a chance, but Edward was handed a life sentence at Blackgate Federal Penitentiary,
Just execute the guy.
located on a solvated island in Gotham Bay. The remote location and harsh environment that surrounded it made escaping not
Blackgate?
an option.
Harsh punishment.
You see, Arkham Asylum was meant for the criminally insane.
Oh, yeah, there was another
one
prison.
that society had cast out. But when all these
Did they seriously start doing this? Interviewing other people? Where was that before? Who's this guy?
super criminals
Harold
began to
Nashton.
appear in Gotham, the city realized that Arkham just wasn't enough. Blackgate was retrofitted with everything it would need to house special case criminals like Victor Fries, Kirk Langstrom, Waylon Jones.
Oh. Sorry, I have to charge my battery. Waylon Jones, he looks as ridiculous as ever. That's Victor Fries, and that's Man Bat. Okay, the first two I'm interested, especially the second one. But the third one, it just looks cheap.
Name a few. It only made sense that someone like Edward Nygma would end up there.
Yeah.
Blackgate had the facilities to contain a man whose intellect was so sharp that he would escape any normal prison.
But this wasn't any normal prison. This is escape plan
After many
levels
years
of
of
prison. Well, okay, escape plan came out way after.
incarceration, Edward Nygma had become extremely agitated and bored. He was slightly relieved by
Did
his
they seriously
responsibilities
record the
of
guy?
being caretaker of the penitentiary library, but he was still cursed by his own mind. Eventually, the agitation gave way to compliance. When Tim Drake, or Red Wing as he was now known in the crime-fighting world,
Oh, this guy.
came to
again.
a dead end in his investigation of the sequence killer, Victor Zars, Tim had the idea to interview Nygma.
Victor
He
Zars.
hoped this would give him insight into what made thrill murderers like him tick. The Riddler, now much more amicable due to the years behind bars, readily cooperated.
At least you got something to do.
Tim was not prepared for the games the Riddler would play with him. Edward did help, of course, in the capture of Mr.
Stop
Zars,
showing that picture.
but he
It's
used
silly.
the relationship with Tim as an opportunity to attempt an escape. It was thwarted at the last minute by the Red Wing and the Spoiler.
Spoiler.
The interaction was not wasted. It was an early attempt at what eventually became criminal profiling. Tim Drake utilized this new technique and pioneered it for a new generation of law enforcement during his career later in life with the FBI.
Oh, good for him.
Edward Nygma lived out his days in Blackgate. Even though he was compliant with his imprisonment now, he still resented the guards and hated the Batman for putting him there. He may have been resigned to his fate, but he would never forget the one who was responsible for it. His idea of the perfect crime was not as perfect as he would have liked to believe, and his self-proclaimed genius and moral recuse were ambiguous at best.
Yep.
The Batman was able to see through his trickery and put an end to the reign of the Riddler. While the Riddler hated the Batman, he also had a grudging respect for the Vigilante. The Bat had bested him intellectually, and that truth haunted Nygma and seeded doubt in his own mind about his beliefs and philosophies. Riddler died in Blackgate many years later, and no one mourned for his death, as he had alienated himself from society by claiming to be intellectually superior. His parents were dead by his
Why are you recording this guy? Is this an interview or something?
own hands. He had no family or friends to speak of. When he died alone. The Riddler's reign was over. What do liars do after death? They lie still.
They lie still. Well, if they reincarnate, maybe. So Edward Nygma is pretty much like... It pretty much reminds me of a couple of videos from Legal Eagle about this animated short where the two guys try to commit a perfect crime, but they end up getting sloppy. And of course, LA Noire being reacted to by a cop, an actual police. Or FBI agent, I don't know. One of the guys behind the government did react to that video. And I'm rather surprised that they didn't take advantage of... They didn't bring up the whole... since it was in the 20s, the evidence gathering is not as great as it is today. Today we use latex gloves, but in the past, no, we don't. I am kind of disappointed that they didn't bring it up, but whatever. And also, Edward Nygma. This guy is bored as hell. Sucker, can you learn to love? Love? Yeah, sometimes being the smartest guy in the universe can be a little bit of a curse. Logic needs to be tempered with emotion. You probably should have layered your logic with love or something. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gotten into this mess. And did he not break out once? Did he end up putting Prince in for the rest of his life and that's it? There's no escape? Well, okay, there was an attempted escape, I think, with Tim Drake. But Tim Drake is like, nah, fuck that shit. And he ended up picking up a new trick from Edward Nygma. It's funny that Edward has respect for the Batman. I mean, the Batman certainly managed to beat him with his intellect. I know that when in the Arkham games, the Riddler's like, you cheated, like an angry losing toddler. But in this, he's like, good one, I suppose. That's certainly different. Use your knowledge to help people, not to commit perfect crimes and shit. Especially murder. If you like what you see, please consider liking and subscribe to my channel. And I hope you have a good day or night and take care.